Hey guys, it's Clara, and today I wanted to share with you a reason why I believe that God exists. This video is part of a series of my journey through 3 questions. Does God exist? What does observation tell us about God? And has God revealed himself to us? This video is about how the complexity of the universe tells us that God exists, as well how coincidence is not a sufficient explanation for the complexity and design of the universe. As well, I'll be going through the conditions necessary for life to exist. I wanted to start off with this quote from Einstein. He says, "Everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of man, and one in the face of which we, with our modest powers, must feel humble. The scientist's religious feeling takes the form of a rapturous amazement at the harmony of natural law, which reveals an intelligence of such superiority. Compared with it, all the systematic thinking and acting of human beings is an utterly insignificant reflection." Many of us know of Einstein's famous quote, "God does not play dice with the universe," that the universe in all of its complexity, design, did this come to be through coincidence. At the end of this video, I wanted to go through all of the conditions necessary for life to exist. The conditions necessary for life are extremely complex and highly unlikely for all of them to coincide and maintain at a constant. Not only that, some of these conditions are unstable equilibriums. A stable equilibrium is if you put a marble in a bowl, the marble eventually would come to rest at the very bottom of the bowl. But what an unstable equilibrium is if you flip that bowl upside down and you attempted to balance that marble at the very top of the bowl. If you did manage to balance it, any slight movement or agitation would disturb the marble and it would completely roll off and not remain at rest anymore. So the argument is that it's more reasonable to attribute this to an unknown force or intelligent design than mere coincidence. The reason why Einstein says this, and the reason why I personally think that this is a valid argument, is because the entire complexity of the universe and life as we see it cannot be distilled down into one single complexity. A simplification to a single probability is not an accurate representation. So, for example, it's not like winning the lottery. An example of this is if your friend won the lottery. So, if your friend won the lottery, you wouldn't immediately think that he cheated or he didn't deserve it or somehow he hacked the system. But if he consecutively won an additional 4 lotteries the next day and the day after that and the day after that, then you might think that there was some foul play or something that was wrong with the system that rigged him to win. And this is the argument behind what we see in life and so much more than just winning the lottery. In other words, it's not a probability that can be accurately represented if it's singularly distilled down. It warrants an inference of design or some unknown force. When we look around at the world and we think about every part of it, the world is really one great big machine divided into an infinite number of smaller machines. And all of these machines and different parts are fitted to one another at such a great functionality and accuracy that with all the technology, intelligence, and reason that we have, we've barely come to understand the mechanics of a single cell or single-celled organisms. Something that I found really interesting was William Paley's watchmaker argument. If you were walking along a path and you came across a watch on the ground, you would not immediately think, oh, the elements came together and randomly rocks and metal from inside the earth came up and comprised this watch. You would think that someone dropped it and that an intelligent designer or a human or many humans who create blueprints sent this to a factory and this watch was made. And the reason why you think this is because of two reasons. The first is that the watch is an intricately and precisely created item. If any of its parts, its gears or cogs or needles were shaped any differently, then the accuracy would be off and the watch would not perform its purpose. They were designed to function in that way together in a complex manner to tell time. And the second reason why you would make this assumption is because a watch produces a function that only an intelligent agent would find valuable. So we're the intelligent agents, and when we look at our watch, then we recognize and we read the time, and we use that time to see if we're late for an appointment or see what time we should go to bed. So baseline, you would assume that this is a product of ingenuity and intelligence and manufacturing. Paley then goes on to say that the material universe exhibits the same functional complexity as a watch, except that every manifestation of design, every way that something can be designed, exists in nature, with exception that in nature it exists to a degree that is incomprehensible to humans. And not only that, but it exceeds all human computation. It exceeds all the designs of human thought and human intelligence and reason. We still haven't fully understood the inner workings of nature. The famous philosopher Thomas Aquinas says that things that lack knowledge or that are unintelligent, like rocks, cannot move towards an end unless directed by something with intelligence, like an arrow being directed by an archer. God can create through any means, including evolution. And the order that we see exists in all the fine aspects of the universe that allow life to exist, comes from design and a purpose. From a philosophical and a scientific standpoint, something doesn't move from disordered to ordered without force or reason, especially to a state of extreme orderliness. For example, if you take a watch, which is not nearly as complex as the universe, and you dismantle it into all of its tiny pieces and parts, and you take all of those parts and you put it in a bag and you shake that bag, and you shake that bag for 1,000,000 years or 1,000,000,000,000 years or a few trillion years. At the end of it, you're not going to reach your hand into the bag and take out a fully formed watch. The law of entropy states that an isolated energetic system will move from an organized state to a disorganized one. A disorganized state will not move to an organized state. This is because the organized state is much more complex and the probability of disorganized states are far greater. For example, billiard balls move from the state of an organized rack to a scattered state after you hit them. And basically, we find ourselves at the conclusion that the most reasonable stance is an argument of a designer or a force or reason behind what we see in the world today. And as we go on now to talk about the conditions necessary for life to exist, keep in mind that there's no reason for these conditions to be maintained for billions of years. The conditions necessary for life to exist could have occurred for the spark of a second and then never happened again. And in extension, I'd like to ask, just because the conditions necessary for life exist, does that mean that life would just spontaneously erupt? Like, would things just start coming to life on the surface of the earth because that earth was habitable? With all of this in mind, is it reasonable to believe that all of this can be attributed to chance? The first thing that we have to consider is that the universe is approximated to be 13.7 billion years old. And of that time, the Earth has been around for approximately 4.5 billion years. So the Earth has existed for about a third of the time of the universe. And humans have only been around for about 200,000 years. For humans to come into being, a very complex mammal life, there had to be a very long time period that life existed on Earth. And the reason that life has existed on Earth until today is because the diversity of life has allowed us to survive the great extinctions. If different factors or aspects of those extinctions were different, life could have been completely sterilized on Earth rather than there just being a great extinction and some life moving on. So I hope that gives an overview of even how unlikely it is for me to be sitting here today. So how complex are the conditions necessary for life? What are all of the things that we currently understand today that make it possible for life to exist, that if they didn't exist, life wouldn't exist? Some of those things are tectonic plates, a very complex chemistry that exists on Earth, the presence of oxygen, plenty of water, an atmospheric pressure, a large rock planet, a carbon cycle, and the different components of balancing carbon over billions of years on Earth. Jupiter, that acts as our solar system's cleanup, the habitable zone of a star, an appropriate star, and all of those things are the things that I'll cover in this next video. So thanks for watching, and I hope you found the content valuable. Subscribe if you liked it. Thank you. Bye.